Imagine this, the most powerful man of the ancient world, surrounded by defeated enemies with all the legions at his feet. And suddenly, he gives up everything. But why? Would it be an act of humility, a trick, or the biggest political coup in the history of Rome? His name was Octavian, and at that moment, he didn't just control Rome. He was Rome. But what he did next changed the fate of mankind forever. At the height of his glory, after crushing his greatest rivals, Brutus, Pompey, Lepidus, and Mark Antony, Octavian found himself at the highest point of power a Roman man had ever attained. Everyone in Rome wondered the same question. Would he now take for himself the title of dictator for life, as Julius Caesar had done? Or would he crown himself king? These ideas were not just speculations, they were real fears of the senatorial elite, who feared to see the Republic definitively buried. But Octavian chose an unexpected path, a dangerous game. Octavian, more than anyone else, understood that Rome was exhausted. Years of civil wars, betrayals, and personal ambitions had reduced the Republic to a broken shell. In theory, the Senate still ruled the Roman territories. In practice, illegality, chaos, and corruption dictated the rules. But he also knew that senators, even in their weakness, would never formally hand over power to a single man. Octavian knew this, and that's why he drew up a plan as subtle as it was genius. If he presented himself as a dictator, the opposition would grow. The civil war could start again. He needed time and stability to reform the state. Then, on January 13th, 27 BC, Octavian surprised everyone. He publicly announced to the Senate that he was abandoning public life. He said that he would return all his powers to the Senate and the Roman people, renouncing any military, administrative, or political authority. The shock was immediate. It was as if the ground had been taken from the feet of the Roman elite. What if I told you that this gesture, which seemed like a renunciation, was it actually the first move of the greatest plan of domination in history? You are about to understand how a man became emperor without declaring himself king. And so, if this content has already hooked you so far, it is a sign that you are one of us. Someone who seeks a real story, told with intensity and without fluff. So do the following. Leave the like now, because it shows the algorithm that this type of story deserves to be told to more people. Subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. What Augusto did next will surprise you even more. And together we will unearth the truths that Rome has tried to hide for centuries. Most senators panicked. For the common people, peace was directly associated with the figure of Octavian. His departure would mean the collapse of the newly won stability. Civil wars could start again. Political assassinations would return. And the memory of a recent past bathed in blood was still fresh in everyone's minds. Therefore, in an almost desperate gesture, the senators themselves began to beg him to stay. But Octavian remained silent, irreducible. The more he resisted, the more the senators gave in. Each proposal made to convince him meant in practice a new piece of the Republic being torn away. Thus, after much pressure and clamor from the Senate, Octavian accepted an apparently modest offer, but with a monstrous scope: direct control of the most strategic provinces of the empire, among them Gaul, which meant not only territorial prestige, but the command of practically all the legions. This concession, disguised as honor, was in fact the silent consecration of a new regime. Octavian had, in practice, total power over the army and finance, the basis of any empire. While the senators retained nominal control of some regions, such as Macedonia and North Africa, the truth was clear. Octavian now commanded 20 legions, compared to only 6 in the Senate. What's more, he also began to choose who would govern the provinces under his rule. That is, his allies were promoted, protected, and obeyed throughout the empire. Nothing escaped his gaze, And all this, curiously, within the legality. But the apex was yet to come. On January 16th, 27 BC, the Senate offered Octavian two decisive titles. The first was that of Prince of the Senate, the Princeps Senatus, the most influential member of the House. Before, it was just a symbolic position. But with Octavian, the title became synonymous with absolute, legalized, praised, uncontested leadership. And then came the final blow. He would be given the name Augusto. This was not just a political title, it was a name with religious weight. Augustus meant the revered, the sacred, the one chosen by the gods. At this moment, Rome was not just appointing a leader, he was blessing a new kind of power, the empire masquerading as a republic. Octavian, now Augustus, knew that brute power could destroy, but the appearance of humility seduced. So he refused the outward symbols of royalty. No constant laurel wreath, no golden scepter, no purple tunic. He preferred to maintain an appearance of first among equals, reinforcing the illusion that the Senate still governed. It was political theater, and Rome, thirsty for stability, gave a standing ovation. His caution was enchanting, and as a sign of approval, the Senate offered him a golden shield with the words valor, piety, mercy, and justice. This shield was not just a tribute, it was a piece of propaganda displayed at curia meetings, as if to say, look, he is virtue personified. And the people believed. Over the years, Augusto continued to wear the same disguise, that of a servant of the Republic. But in practice, he made all the decisions. He appointed governors, approved reforms, and oversaw the army with an iron fist. He did not rule above the law. He became the law itself. Without shedding blood, Augustus had buried the old republic and created something entirely new, an empire with a face of democracy. But Augusto didn't just want power, he wanted eternity. He dreamed of a dynasty, of a lineage that would perpetuate his authority even after his death. But maintaining power is a battle. Transmit it. It is another much more difficult one. His first heir was the young Marcello, his nephew, molded to succeed him. But in 23 BC, Marcellus died suddenly at the age of 21. It was a devastating blow. And as if that were not enough, that same year, Augusto himself fell seriously ill. Believing he was on the verge of death, he appointed his loyal friend and right-hand man, Marcus Agrippa, as his successor. As a strategic gesture, he married Agrippa to his daughter, Julia, ensuring that Augustus's blood flowed into the next generation. From this union, two boys were born, Gaius and Lucius, who would be raised as children of the emperor himself. It was hope being reborn, but the peace was brief. In 20 BC, Rome was plunged into a severe supply crisis. The shortage of grain spread fear. Hunger was knocking on doors. The people demanded that Augusto solve it. At first, he refused to take extraordinary powers. However, under pressure, he agreed to be appointed overseer of the Grand of Rome. And in a short time, the crisis was resolved, and his popularity skyrocketed. Once again, Augusto proved that he knew exactly when to retreat and when to take control. 20 BC, as the dust of the crisis settled, a new threat emerged in the shadows. Classified information reached Augustus. Fannius Scipio and his ally Lucius Licinius Murena were conspiring to overthrow him. The Rome of appearances still existed, but behind the marbles and statues, the old struggle for power was still alive. Even without direct evidence and without the accused present to defend themselves, a treason trial was instituted. The prosecutor, an ambitious young man named Tiberius, Augustus's stepson. The accusation was firm. The result, relentless. Guilty. Shortly thereafter, the conspirators were captured and executed. The message was as clear as the steel of a Roman sword. Anyone who dared to defy Augustus would be silenced. There was no room for mercy. The clemency of the Prince of the Senate had limits. Behind the restrained smile and the speech of modesty, there was an emperor who knew exactly when to act with an iron fist. 2 years passed. The appearance of a regime shared with the Senate remained. But inside, Rome was already a centralized empire, with one man at the top, and that man wanted more. The Senate still revered him, but Augustus felt that his power, though immense, was not yet absolute, and he was about to change that forever. In 19 BC, Augusto decided to take the final step. With the unconditional support of the Senate and the brilliant articulation of Agrippa, he received what he most coveted, the Maius Empire. This title, in practice, gave him supreme authority over all the Roman provinces and all the legions of the army. The Republic, as a political idea, was over, but no one dared to say it out loud. Still, Augustus stuck to his golden strategy, appearance of modesty. He only said princeps, the first citizen. He refused to be called king, and whenever possible, he made it clear that the Senate still had a voice. But it was enough to look behind the scenes to realize no one made a decision without consulting him. From that moment on, many historians agree, the Roman Empire was born, and Augustus was his first de facto emperor, even though he never used the word emperor. His power was greater than that of any king. Its influence is more solid than any constitution. With all of Rome under his feet, Augustus turned to Caesar's old dreams to expand the empire, conquer new territories, and ensure that Roman borders were not only respected but feared. Now, with the world in his hands, he needed to ensure that the name Augusto echoed in eternity. With absolute power in his hands, Augusto immersed himself in conquests and reforms. His generals defeated rebellious tribes in Cantabria, annexed lands rich in gold and precious minerals, and consolidated their rule in the Alps, creating a natural barrier against the barbarians of the north. But Augustus was not just a conqueror, he was a master of diplomacy. In 20 BC, he starred in his most celebrated symbolic victory, the return of the battle standards taken by the Parthians in the humiliating defeat of Chaereas. Instead of war, he used negotiation, and he transformed this gesture into a patriotic spectacle. Rome, which had once fallen to its knees, was now exalted, and the people believed that even the gods had surrendered to the new regime. But it was not only on the borders that Augusto left his mark. He reformed Rome's urbanism, created a road network that united the empire, invested in naval security to patrol the Mediterranean, and encouraged the arts as never seen before. He was the patron of Virgil, Horace, and other giants of classical literature. He ordered the erection of temples, aqueducts, baths, and the Pantheon. Under his leadership, Rome ceased to be a city of bricks and became an empire of marble, shining as never before under the Mediterranean sun. Even with so many glories, the weight of the years fell on Augusto. Defeats still came, as in 9 AD, when 3 entire legions were massacred in Germania, commanded by Publius Quintilius Varus. But the most painful losses were not on the battlefield. They were inside his house. Gaius and Lucius, his heirs raised as princes, died young in 2 and 4 AD, plunging Augustus into despair. Agrippa, his faithful squire, was already dead. With no alternatives, he adopted his stepson, Tiberius, on the condition that he adopt Germanicus, securing a line of succession. Tiberius, a gloomy and reluctant man, was forced to abandon his wife to marry Julia, daughter of Augustus. All for Rome. In his final years, Augusto withdrew from active politics. He dedicated himself to writing his memoirs, The Deeds of the Divine Augustus. In 14 AD, at the age of 71, he died. His last words are said to have been, "I found Rome made of bricks. I leave it made of marble." Caesar's young warrior had gone further than anyone could have imagined. Not only did he avenge his adoptive father, he surpassed Caesar. It created an era. It shaped a nation. And he went down in history as the man who transformed a dying republic into the greatest empire of the ancient world. His name still echoes centuries later: Augustus, the eternal emperor of Rome. You've just traversed the dark corridors of Roman politics, witnessed the rise of a man who didn't just defeat his enemies, but he rewrote the rules of the world. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you values not just facts, but meanings. And if this story stirred his vision of power, legacy, and intelligence, so you know what to do. Leave your like now. It's the simplest way to say, I want more stories like this. Subscribe to the channel because this journey is just beginning. Rome still has secrets to reveal. And here, with each video, the truth breathes again. Comment below. Do you think Augusto was a genius hero or a master manipulator who killed the Republic? And remember, every click of yours helps this empire of stories to reach more minds. See you in the next episode, because the Rome that no one tells, we dig it up here.